Hello everyone, Coach Kira here, and basically I'll be showing you guys my tier list for the new patch, and it is crazy changes. And based on my experience playing League of Legends, I can promise you I know what's gonna be OP and I can read the meta and what Riot Games is doing. So let's take a quick look, okay? What is Riot Games doing with the patch notes? These are all the changes for jungle that I found relevant. I put down everything and I'll be going through all of them. And it's Brand, Master Yi, Nautilus, Qiyana, Rek'Sai, Sylas, Zyra, Jarvan, Nocturne, Shaco, Trundle, Xin Zhao, and Viego and Mordekaiser. A lot of changes. I'll be going through those champions and I'll be explaining what's gonna be OP and what's gonna be weak, and I'll show you the most broken champions to get out of low elo, okay? So let's start with all the S tiers, and just so you know, if you're looking for the high elo tier list, join my Discord in the link below, because I'm not gonna make a tier list for high elo and low elo and explain it for 1 hour. So I just made the high elo one on Discord. I have an image, but I'm just doing the platinum and below. The high elo is Emerald plus. Anyway, let's get to it. What do I think is S tier in low elo? Honestly, almost any bruiser that can fight a lot. Let's start with like Volibear. This champion, easily S tier, because I even made an unranked to master with Volibear clearing top to bot only. A very straightforward champion, probably even close to Z tier in low elo, but I'll just put it S tier. Very solid, highly recommended to pick up, okay? After Volibear, which I think is probably the strongest right now, which is good in lower and high elo, and champs such like Warwick for example, this champion is not as good. Why is that? Because once you get to higher elo, it falls off. So that's why I would not recommend Warwick as much as Volibear, whereas Volibear works in high and low elo, okay? So I'll first put down the most important to least important champions that I think you should play. So there's Briar. I'll put it on C for now, so I remember, because these are S tier and lower elos, but they're better champions. So right now as well, let's take a look at this one, Trundle. Trundle got nerfed and is one of the champions that got affected. So regarding Trundle, you can see that it basically got nerfed, and what got nerfed is W attack speed by basically 20%, but that is if you put skills in it. Level 1 it's always the same, and just the W cooldown 2 seconds extra. The nerf doesn't matter. The champion still beats you 1v1, so it's still completely Gucci, okay? So Trundle is still very viable, and I'll put it on S tier as well. After Trundle, what do I think is super strong? I would say after Trundle, I would say Nocturne is very solid. It's always one of those champions that even if you get to like Emerald Diamond, Nocturne is still completely fine. It's just not gonna be as good in every situation if enemy has a lot of dashes, because if enemy has a lot of dashes, you can't really, you know, be that useful, because imagine enemy has like a LeBlanc mid lane or an Ahri, you ult and you're useless. So some of the other champions might be better than Nocturne. So depending on draft, Nocturne can still be good. And let's go to our next champion. Which other champion would I consider S tier for platinum and below? So the other champion that I consider S tier for platinum and below is basically, well, I guess next one will be Warwick, because these are just simple champions that you can play, which is very easy to execute. And just so you know, regarding Sylas, Nautilus, we'll be covering it later, but give me 1 second. I think I even forgot to add Nautilus here, by the way. My brain completely forgot about Nautilus, so let me add this bad boy real quick. It's the first time I had to add a Nautilus from the tier list, so yeah, we added a Nautilus, which we'll wait with for now, okay? Trust me, it's not S tier. Imagine Nautilus against Volibear Trundle, not gonna be playable, okay? It's not playable. In low elo, not recommended. But yeah, I would say Warwick and Briar are next. If you'd ask me which one is higher, is it Warwick over Briar? I would say preference, like whatever you prefer. I would say that probably Warwick is solid, but I think as you go to higher elo, I think Briar might be a bit better than Warwick. Warwick is just a noob low elo stomper. So if you're in low elo, Warwick's completely fine. It beats as well most champs 1v1, but it just falls off a bit. Next one will be Briar, and I would put somewhere Amumu here as well. I think Amumu would be even above Warwick and Briar. But one thing of Amumu, okay? Before we talk about Warwick, Amumu is a champion that requires you to play with ultimate. So if you have ultimate, you can fight objectives. If not, don't fight objectives. You have no ultimate for objective, give objective and farm. Completely fine. The whole point of picking Amumu and why it's S tier is because you play with ultimate, you power farm, you play team fights. Very solid, okay? If you don't do that, don't play Amumu. Play any other brainhead ape champ that just wins all in without ultimate, like Volibear or Trundle or Warwick, you know? Anyway, these are the champions that I consider basically S tier. there's not any other champ that I'm like, okay, it's very solid. So these are champs I would recommend in lower elo. Of course, as you get to platinum, I would say Briar's maybe like A tier. Same for Warwick, right? But I would say silver and below, especially as gold-ish, I'll put it like A. That's how you have to see it, okay? Anyway, so now what is next? Let's take a look at A+. The A+ champions is definitely Jarvan. Why Jarvan? Jarvan is not a champion that beats everyone 1v1. It loses against Volibear, loses against Trundle, loses against Nocturne, loses against Warwick, loses against Briar. It does not lose against Amumu, but Amumu is easier to execute in teamfights. But why did I put Jarvan in A+? Because it's a bruiser champion, it has really good engage, and if you just take your camps, play for ultimate, make picks, you're still very solid. So that's why I would put Jarvan on A+. Alongside Jarvan, I'm gonna put Xin Zhao A+. Why am I putting Xin Zhao A+? I am putting Xin Zhao A+, because Xin Zhao honestly is very, very solid. And in my opinion, if you were to ask me what champion should I pick up after Volibear Trundle, I would say Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao is good in low elo, good in high elo. The only downside of Xin Zhao is that its farms a little bit slow and you can't really gank as easily. You can't jump over a wall. You're like very simple. But in skirmishing, you're gonna be very strong. So if there's any champs I recommend, Volibear, Xin Zhao, Trundle are solid picks. Even Jarvan, but Jarvan a bit less, because it's not always good. But I would say Volibear, Trundle, Xin Zhao almost always solid, considering the meta is very bruiser-ish. Alright, after that, what's next? I would say next would be Pantheon. Why Pantheon? Pantheon is one of those champs as well that is solid 1v1. So I would say that if this champion is solid 1v1, it's usually a pretty solid champion. It's a bruiser, so even if you make mistakes, you won't really die. So, you can actually buy enough time for your teammates to come close. You have a global ultimate, so you can catch people. So that's why I would say Pantheon is still A+. It is just overall a very solid champion. And remember, Jarvan got nerfed a little bit. Jarvan basically got, well, 0.6 armor reduced per level. It's fine. Xin Zhao, 20 base health and the base damage per hit on passive, 5. Sure, no problem. These champions are still very strong. Nocturne, the armor growth, 0.5 as well. 5, 8, less damage than 80. It doesn't matter. What Riot Games is trying to do, they're trying to balance champions. So when I say they're trying to balance champions, this is what I mean. Let's take a look at the tier list here. This is like gold tier list, okay, global. Xin Zhao, Trundle, Wukong, Viego, Jax, then Ren and Teemo, Poppy, then Ekko. And then some AP joiners, but it's very dominated by bruisers. And if you look at the win rate, right, you can see that the highest win rate champions are the bruisers. Why is that? They're a bit tanky, they're allowed to make more mistakes, and they're strong 1v1. In low elo, people don't really know their matchups, so champs that just and win 1v1 are very strong. And let's look at when the AP champs start becoming solid, like at, I don't know, but after 13 champions or something, right? So they're really trying to like buff AP champions and make sure that it's a bit more balanced. That's why Riot Games is trying to buff Brand, as you can see, the passive. They're trying to buff Zyra. They're trying to bring back a bit more AP joiners, and now, because they're buffing the AP joiners, Zyra actually, where would I put her? Depending on what you play against, but if you know a bit how to play Zyra, like just the baseline, it depends on how low elo you are, but if you're on platinum, gold-ish, I would already put Zyra on A+. Why A+? Because this champion, trust me bros, if you just farm full clear and then look for a play and you learn a little bit about threat assessment and positioning, this champ will be very solid. You can play this champ like a poke champion if you want to and just play very fucking safe and play very slow. I would recommend you, if you want to play Zyra, please watch a clear tutorial and watch how you should skirmish a bit. I have a video on it on my YouTube if you want to check it out. But basically, please watch how to play the champion. If you don't do that, it's B tier. If you watch and study how to play Zyra, even a low elo, it can be A+. Otherwise B tier. Very big difference, okay? But I would say A+. Alright, what's the next A+ champion? The next A+ champion is the following. Wukong. I would say Wukong over Zyra because Wukong is like same like Xin Zhao. Very solid champion at teamfighting. So if you get to full clear, get your base, get level 6, teamfight, you're very strong. But on Wukong, I would highly recommend you to learn the Wukong combo. Watch on YouTube a video Wukong combo and see how to play this champion. If you don't know how to like E, alt attack, Q, R, W, alt attack, Q, R, just the Wukong combo, your ass. So try to really learn like the basic combo of the champion in order for you to make the highest usage of this champion. And then I would even rate Wukong right here. That's where I would put Wukong. But you need to learn a combo, of course. So I would say it's pretty much up there with Wukong, Xin Zhao, and then... yeah, this is how I would rate the champions. Like, the order does matter here, by the way, okay? Alright, so what is next on the list? Especially in lower elo, I would say that beefier champions always are a bit better. And I would say that Sylas, by the way, is sadly not up there yet. Because Sylas, sadly, it doesn't really skill as well in teamfights. I do think it's going to be a bit of a disappointment. Even though the clear is going to be better, trust me, it's probably going to be B or A-. And regarding Sylas buffs, let's take a look at Sylas. Sylas, basically, what happened is that he's getting his passive buffed, so he gets to clear faster. That doesn't change the nature of the champion, which means that even if you play against the Sylas mid lane, unless he's fed, it's not stronger than, like, you know, a control mage. It's not stronger than a bruiser that's tankier, deals pretty insane damage as well, and doesn't have to wait for cooldowns. So I would say Sylas is still A tier, not stronger than other champions, but if Sylas has very good ultimates, like an Amumu ultimate, or he has like, what else? What other ultimates super OP? Nautilus ultimate, right? Sure, but Sylas A+. If he has many ults to play with, sure, he can be decent. But generally speaking, I'll put him A- to be honest. That's where I would put him, okay? But I'm gonna wait with Sylas. I'm just spoiling a bit where I put Sylas, but it's fine. I'll just put it A. I'll finish the remainder of the A+, okay? What should be next on A+? So A+ champions, in my opinion, should be pretty strong, especially in the meta, right? So I consider Mordekaiser A+ as well. Why is this? Because Mordekaiser is a champion that's very good against melee champions. So if enemy locks in champion like Volibear or Wukong, Jarvan, even Pantheon, trust me, Mordekaiser does very good against those champions. If you even look at the win rate of Mordekaiser, it's like in the top 6 or something in gold elo. Why is that? Because most people pick bruiser champions, and Mordekaiser, unironically, is actually stronger than you think. So it's a very niche champion, but trust me, it's actually stronger than most people think. It's a bit boring, but hey, you counter your opponent and you're Gucci. Alright, so what is next on the menu? What is next on the menu on A+ is the following. It is probably going to be Jaximus. So Jaximus is really situational, but if people are playing like Trundle, Volibear, Xin Zhao, very specific champions that hit a lot, it's very solid. But with Jax, the downside is that your clear is a bit slow, it's not that fast, so you should see your champion as like a full clear champion and wait till you get items, and if you have a good matchup, you're insanely good. But let's say you play Jax against Zyra, not playable. So that is not recommended, okay? Alright, next champion. I would say Mundo. I would say Mundo is a little bit stronger than Jax. I think Mundo is just very solid, I think. Most of the times in lower elo, people are gonna buy enchanters. And if people are gonna play enchanters, you have a Mundo in your team, so you can basically tank for your team. But once again, I think Mundo is a very boring champion. You full clear, get your items, get a giant belt, get another giant belt, you're super OP. You're just being tanky for your team, but you're not really having much carry potential, you know? If you get some free kills, you can be unkillable. If you play against champs like Jhin, Zoe, Syndra mid lane, just champs that don't have a lot of burst, or Ahri, Akali, you're chilling. They don't have damage to kill you. So pick Mundo if you see a draft where enemy has like a low draft composition, like Ezreal, just any champ that doesn't have much DPS. Then Mundo is like even S tier, okay? Depending on the draft. Alright, where do I put Shyvana? I think Shyvana as well in lower elo is A+. I would put Shyvana like probably here over Jax still, because I think Shyvana can poke from a quite good distance. And I would say Shyvana is pretty solid, especially if you just farm, play for Drake if you can, get your item power spikes. And if you get your item power spikes and you know how to play with your ultimate a bit slow, you're chilling. But Shyvana is a champion where you really want to power farm and play Drakes if possible. So you don't win every single 1v1, but once you get items, your scaling becomes actually pretty good. Okay? Alright, so there's another champion that I think can be very good, depending on the situation. So Brand, by the way, this champ is really underrated. The Q 1.5 to 1.75. That is a really big buff. In the current meta, so many people are playing melee champions. So usually I would say in low elo, don't pick Brand, but I'll be honest, Brand is probably gonna be A tier, considering that in low elo people suck at positioning and it doesn't have that much peel. But I think right now if you play Brand, even if you int, you buy Liandry Rylai, you press EQ WR and you just explode and die. As long as you just full clear and enemy tries to get engaged you just EQ run away, it's A tier. A+. I truly believe that these buffs are huge, but one thing, if you can't land skill shots and you really suck at using Q, it's B tier. If you can hit your Q, A+ tier, okay? That's what I would say about this tier list, alright? In the A+. Alright, so what is next and what would I put here? So, what other champs A+? Fiddlesticks. Why is Fiddlesticks A+? Because Fiddlesticks, people just run into you. If champions run into you, guess what? It's super easy to get free kills because a lot of people just run into your face, they die. They don't really think about threats. But these AP champions, you only want to play them, especially if you have an AD mid lane. With Brand mid lane, ideally you want to have like no Syndra in the team, because then enemy buys mercs, your QCC gets reduced. Same for Fiddlesticks. Try to have a Yone, try to have a Zed in your team, only then they're A+. So, if you're playing low elo, your mid lane's looking Victor, Syndra, it's instantly B tier in my books. Not as good. So make sure you have the right team composition, otherwise it's nowhere in A+, okay? Alright. In lower elos as well, I think Kayn is just A tier. I think these are the champions that I consider A+. I could maybe add another champion, but I'll be very honest. I think for low elo, that's as good as it gets for A+. I would say maybe Diana is an exception too. I would say Diana is A+ as well, but I would say the tank build, the Liandry into Riftmaker, not the Neshertooth, because in lower elo you want to be a bit beefier. So I'm gonna put Diana A+, simply because this champion can build a bit tanky and he has engage. So I'm gonna put it A+. It's very solid as well if you have an AD champion on mid lane, but it's fine with AP as well. As long as you have an AD top lane, AD support, you're completely chilling, okay? So as for the next champion, honestly, if I look at most of these champions, I would say that that's about it. But remember, Master Yi got a pretty nice buff as well. Q applies Kraken Slayer and Terminus. It's not like a crazy buff, but it's kinda nice. And depending on how you play Master Yi, and if you're good on Master Yi, I would easily put it on A+, not S tier, but you kind of need to play a bit properly, right? And not play like a complete NPC. And I would then put it A+, because people don't save their spells for Master Yi, they just go in, and Master Yi can then make a pentakill. So I would put Master Yi A+. And after that, I have still a little Udyr. Udyr is always solid. For me, it's like A-, but I don't really want to put it A tier. I think Udyr is a very strong, solid champion. So I'm gonna put it like right here. And why did I put Udyr right here? It's because even right here, maybe-ish. Because Udyr but it's pretty solid against most of the champs in A+ and S. But I feel like the champion can do a bit less than other champions in teamfights. It has like less agency. So I will put it on A+. Instead of like A. Because in the end, it's still a very strong, solid 1v1 champion. That's why I put it there. Alright. So now let's go to the A tiers. And if I'm correct, I didn't miss anything. So I would say Ivern is A tier, depending on what elo you are. If you're very low elo, I think Ivern isn't as OP. So if you're bronze, iron, silver, Ivern is like it's like C tier maybe even. But once you get a bit higher, I would say it's easily A or A+, depending on the draft you're playing against. If you're playing Ivern, ideally, you want to have a melee champion. So a melee champion like Leona and all the support helps a lot. So that way that you can shield your support, they can frontline, and then you can actually play front to back and win team fights. But yeah, like I said, depending on what elo, I would say generally speaking, for me, I think it's A tier. Alright, so what is next A tier? And I'll try to choose the most OP A tiers first. I think as well, okay, Taliyah is just simply B tier. Not much has changed by Taliyah. I think this champion is like, relies really heavily on you landing your WE. Good positioning, you don't have that much peel. B tier is sadly not as good. So yeah, I'll put a B tier. As for A tier, okay, Vi is A tier. Why is Vi A tier? It doesn't beat most of the champs in A+ or S. Scaling wise is kind of meh as well. I think the win rate dropped significantly as well after the nerfs. We can take a quick look at the win rate here of Vi, but I feel like it fell off after they nerfed her. It says even D tier. It's like 48% win rate. So I don't think it's like B tier. I think that's criminal. It's for sure A tier, but it's on the lower end. And lower end in low elo, A tier is like, it's not like bad, but it's not good. It's like ok. I would not recommend to play this champion. Any other champion A+ might be better, depending on the draft of course, right? For example, Jax should not be here if he's not playing against a good champion. But most of the times, he's playing against a good champion, especially because people are playing more Trundle and Volibear. That's why Jax is A+. Alright, Kayn should be as well an A tier. It doesn't have good ganks, skirmishes are meh, red form can be good if you play against a lot of melee champions. However, it's not really as consistent as the other champions. I'm not recommending this champion as much because this champion doesn't require... Okay, it requires fundamentals, but it cheats gank execution, for example. I think playing other champions, you'll learn jungle in a better way. Alright, Olaf.
Okay.
Olaf, I reconsider it A tier. Why do I... Oh, it does Rams. Okay, A tier. Why A tier? I think it's a very solid champion. However, once you fall behind, you're a bit cooked. And this champion isn't... It's pretty straightforward. You throw X, you go in. But once you fall behind, you're kinda really gonna be useless. And most of the other champions are still useful. So that's why I put it A tier. Don't get me wrong, I think Olaf can easily be A+ if played properly. But because the champion doesn't have much CC to get onto the enemy team, and if you don't know how to force fights properly, it's A tier. Because straight up fights, you need to make them come into you, then it's easy, but usually in lower elo, people don't know how to do so. Alright, let's now take a look at Viego, okay? Viego is basically adjusted. The attack speed growth is nerfed a little bit, the Q damage is buffed a little bit, the Q crit is nerfed, which is bad for a collector, and the Q bonus monster damage is less. So what does it do? Basically, the clear is nerfed and crit is nerfed. So usually the normal build is Triforce into Collector into, you know, less Whisper something. So 75%, that really hurts, by the way. That really hurts. Like Bruiser / Tank Viego is still fine, but it's probably not the same. If you go Kraken Titanic, it's like, sure. If you go Kraken Titanic or something, it's probably still fine, honestly. It's not like the end of the world, but crit really took a hit. So maybe right now, I think Kraken might be making a comeback, and it could be still pretty solid. But I would put Viego on A. But with Viego is not about your rank. Viego is about how long have you played League of Legends. If you tell me someone that played League of Legends for like 1 year, can you play Viego? I'll be like, no. Someone that played League of Legends for 6-7 years, can you play Viego? Probably yeah. So depending on how many champs you've played or seen, you can play Viego. If you played the game shortly, B or C. If you played it for a bit, A tier. And why is Viego A tier? It doesn't beat other champs 1v1. You actually have to play fights well, you have to wait for your resets, you have to go in later in fights, so you're not 1 HP when you take a form. It's very situational. And that's why I put it on A tier. As for Poppy, A tier. Poppy is a very solid counter though. So if you play against a champ like Nautilus support and enemy joiner has, let's say, Jarvan, bro, it's S tier. But generally speaking, it's just A tier. So it's like an okay pick, but mostly as a counter pick, I would say. Now let's take a look at the following champion, which is Elise. Elise, I would put Elise A tier in lower ranks, simply because the champion is a bit squishy and it requires you to know how to play around vision, and it's not as easy to execute, and it doesn't scale insanely well in teamfights. Like, Elise is good against most of the A+ champions, however, if both champions full clear and Elise is not making use of her strength, it is A tier. If you know how to make use of her strength, of course, it's A+, but I expect people in lower elo to not know how to do that consistently. That's why I put her on the A tier. And as for the next champion is gonna be Zeki. Okay, so I think Zek is a champion that's a bit hard for people in low elo to play. I'm not even sure if I should put A tier. The problem with Zek is that if you miss your E or Q, it's doomed. That's why I would say Zek. I was thinking A first, but I'll be honest, it might even be B, depending on how good you're on Zek. If you're an OTP, I'll put it A tier or A+, quite easily. But in low elo, I think if you're an OTP on Zek, I recommend it to put it on A tier, because it's not that insane in skirmishing, depending on how big it is, but 1v1 is just dog shit. 2v2, 3v3, it's alright after 6, but with Zek, you just need to land your skill shots, which in lower elo doesn't always happen, so I would put it B tier, but could be easily A tier. As for the next A tier, okay, Bel Veth took a nerf the previous patch. The Bel Veth had 10 damage Q, but it went to 0. They nerfed it quite badly. So honestly, Bel Veth is a champion now that requires like a lot of skill, and I feel like a lot of skill and low elo is not recommended. So I would love to put Bel Veth on A tier, but also on lower ends, like A minus or something. Yeah, like I would say these champs are a bit higher. Let's say Sylas in middle, something like this, you know. But it's just very situational. But I wouldn't even recommend Bel Veth to play. It's like an Ock champion, but it lost its strength, and so many champs became so much easier. Even though other AD champs are getting nerfed, it's like it's alright. I would not recommend though. And as you get to higher elos, Bel Veth becomes even harder. You really need to know well how to play side lane, or it's cooked. That's for Bel Veth. So now what is the next champion? The next champion would be Talonsky. This champion, I'll just do A and B a bit together because they're a bit similar. Talonsky I wouldn't really recommend because it's an assassin. People in lower elos are really bad at assassins. Anything that requires a bit of positioning that's a bit squishy is just not gonna be good. The only reason Brand and Zyra are super good, and even in lower elos, is because they have some form of peeling on protecting themselves, and they deal bomba ass damage in team fights. So that's why I put them in A+, but if your positioning sucks, A or B. So watch some guides on these champions, otherwise you're cooked, okay? Alright, as for the next champion, Kindred, by bro sadly goes on B. Why B? You just need to have good threat assessment, anticipating enemy spells, good spacing, a lot of small things. In low elo, sadly, not a champion. As you get the higher elo, I think it becomes better, but in low elo, no bueno, okay? As for the next champion, I would say Karthus. Sadly, the same for Karthus. I think that this champion, just any champ where you have insane tempo, if you're in low elo and you can't abuse that, Bruisers are just better. Sadly, Karthus is a champion that I in the past recommended, but I think this champion is too difficult for most people to execute, simply because people have really poor base timers, don't play properly for objectives, and don't play with their team. If you don't do that, it's B tier. AP junglers are super good if you play with teammates. If you don't, it's cooked. But people in low elo play very 1v1, which is why these champs are better. Alright, Lillia is more like an OTP champion. If you like a low-key OTP in this champion, I'll put it A tier. It's a pretty solid champion. I wouldn't put it B tier because it has some tankness and mobility, but it's easily A tier. I wouldn't put it on A+ because you need to play a bit slow, and people are really bad at playing slow. So I'll put a bit on the higher A tier. But this champion requires you ideally to have setup on support if possible. If you don't have that, that's okay, but you would really prefer that if possible. As for Ekko, okay, Ekko is probably one of the few AP junglers, once they buffed Lich Bane, that is decent. It's probably one of the best AP junglers right now. However, this champion is still not as good compared to the other champions. I still think the Bruisers right now are stronger, but if you're a decent Ekko, which is OTP level, it's A+, otherwise it's like A tier, okay? So depending how good you are on it, A+ or A. If you don't have games on this champ, don't play that much. Alright, next one. Evelynn. Where would I put Evelynn? This champion got buffed, but it's just B tier. Any champion that's not good in team fighting or requires too much skill to execute is just B tier. So I'm just gonna finish the B tiers. What I think is B tier. The next champ that I consider B tier is, well, Nidalee. Maybe even C tier. This champion, bro, is like Nidalee Rengar is don't touchy. So these are two champs that in low elo I just don't recommend you to play. If you enjoy playing those champs and you really study those champions, you can make it A tier. Don't get me wrong, but it takes so much time and effort compared to the other champions. So I would not recommend that. Hecarim, B tier. Why is Hecarim B tier? You might think, Kire, Hecarim has good ganks. Why is it B tier? Shouldn't it be at least A tier? The problem is, bad skirmishing 1v1. In team fights, you need to know how to play slow. Doesn't happen often. As Hecarim, you need to be able to go in and out. Play team fights slow, doesn't happen. And if you miss your E, you're useless. These champions require you to be like, not like perfect mechanically, but understand really well the limits. If you don't, it's very difficult to execute. Alright, next champion. Shaco B. In team fights, assassins, not playable. If you play Shaco, it's like you cannot play it. Simply because if you play Shaco and you're in mid game and you team fight, you're useless. And in low elo, champs that can just be tanky, decent team fighting are solid. Almost every single champ in A+ or S, that's the case. They're either very good at fighting, they're either very good at like 1v1ing or team fighting. These three things. If they don't have those traits, it's meh. Okay, as for the other... Oh, Qiyana, by the way. Qiyana. I'll save this for later. But Qiyana, bro, oof, juicy. Nasus, I'll be honest, Nasus is actually A tier, I think. Nasus is a champion that's actually not bad. You farm, you're decent scaling, it's pretty solid actually. Believe it or not. Most good against most of these champions. Just farm up. Graves, okay, don't touch. Just illegal. Just don't touch Graves. Not recommended. Gragas, B tier. It's like, why would you play Gragas? It's not like C tier, but it's not like you should play it. Play Gragas only if you have like an AD champion on mid lane, otherwise don't pick it. It has no synergy, no value. Listen, oof, listen. In low elo, okay, I'll give it B tier. It's not C tier, but it's B tier. As a champion, I wouldn't really recommend you to play it. It's still high B tier, but it's actually solid against most champions, but same thing. You need to play slow, you need to play with cooldowns. Not everyone has the patience to do so. Lee Sins, if they just go in and hit without playing slow of Q, it's cooked. In high elo, people do that, it will be A+, but in low elo, it's B tier. Not as good. Alright, Maokai. Yeah, B tier is like, it's an okay pick, but why would you pick Maokai? Like, just don't even play that. Why do you even have Maokai here? Just not recommended. Alright, Nunu. Where would I put Nunu? Nunu's actually A tier. Nunu's A tier, middle A tier, because I think this champ is actually pretty solid at ganking. It has okay scaling. People die to his ganks pretty randomly, but it doesn't teamfight as well. It kind of falls off, but it can tilt people. That's why I put it in A tier. As for Sejuani, depending on the draft, it can be good, but I'll put Sejuani on B tier. It's like, it's such a mid champion that I wouldn't recommend to play. If you have Yon mid lane or something, sure, it can be good, but usually I wouldn't recommend you to play him. Gwen. Okay, Gwen, if you play against a lot of melee champs, it can be A tier, but problem in low elo is that people fight way too fast. Because people fight way too fast, Gwen doesn't even have time to scale. Gwen has bad ganks, it doesn't allow you to actually kill people as easily. Let's compare a Gwen to like a Trundle. It's night and day. Like, Gwen requires time, and low elo people, they don't think about scaling, they just think about fighting. Which is why Gwen is B tier. Rammus is actually A tier. I would say Rammus is pretty solid. I would recommend you to pick Rammus if you play against a lot of on-hit champions. But if you play Rammus, just make sure to full clear camps, be on time on objectives, and be as strong as possible. You can look for ganks, but trust me, if your team composition is good, full clearing is the way to go. Kha'Zix. Oof, Kha'Zix. I'll give Kha'Zix A tier. Why? Because this champion can still easily make picks. This is one of the few champs that I would give A tier. I think it's maybe even B tier in low elo. But I think that it's quite easy to make picks. People just suck against an assassin that can actually stealth onto you. It's not even that bad in teamfights of W, but you just require to know your limits a bit. But I'll put it A tier. Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is like A tier. They tried to adjust Rek'Sai. They even buffed it a little bit, but it's just not as strong as the other champions. It has less value. I do think the champ is solid. I would put it higher A, but it's not that insane. It's just ok. Alright, and as for Skarner, goodbye, but once they nerfed this champ really lost his power, and it's very low win rate, so I'll put a low B tier. And as for these two, Nautilus. Well, you might be wondering, Nautilus with 308 clear, where would Nautilus be? A tier. It's not B tier, because this champ is tanky, it has good clear, so it allows you to be useful. However, it's not A+, because I do think the other champs are more useful. I do think as well that though, you pick Nautilus with an enchanted support and it's not as bad, then it can be A+. But if you pick with like a Leona, I don't know, man. I'm not sure if you want to see Nautilus Leona in the same team. So depending on draft, it's A or A+, okay? As for Qiyana, bro, I'll put this champion in my high elo tier list. The rating I'm gonna give, you'll be surprised. But in low elo, A tier. It's actually a champion that can 1v9 pretty hard in teamfights. It's not even that bad in teamfights. If you know how to play this champ, you can actually 1v9 quite hard. I think this champ is very underrated right now. One of the most underrated champions. And I'll put it A tier. Even though it's an assassin, it can do quite decent in teamfights. And that summarizes my tier list for Platinum and below. The high elo tier list, which is Emerald and above, I'll be making that and I'll be putting that on my Discord, but it won't be recorded. Yeah, thank you for watching and enjoy the tier list. And make sure to abuse the broken champs to get out of low elo and have a good one. Peace, boys.